Okay, today on the show, we have Dan Hellweg from At Properties, Christie's International Real Estate here in Chicago. Now, Dan was born, raised, and currently resides here in Chicago. And Dan Hellweg has a devout passion for the city, unlike others. As a third generation Chicagoan, with both his father and grandfather working for the city, Dan brings a unique perspective to his business. His approach to real estate incorporates a philosophical component, regardless of buying, selling, or transaction type, which gives the control to his clients, all while he guides and maneuvers everything else around the deal. The greatest joy comes when he helps someone accomplish something they thought they could never experience, which for many is, no surprise, buying their first home. Now, Dan also trains for Ironmans. He listens to records while sipping whiskey, and he enjoys time with friends, family, and that's what he does when he's not helping his clients buy and sell real estate. Please, everyone. Dan, I apologize. I forgot to grab your Instagram. Everyone should follow Dan on Instagram, which is A Life with Dan, which is there are periods between that. Is that correct?
It's periods between it, but it's Get Real with Dan.
Sorry about that, guys.
So whoever this all life is, forget that guy. It's Get Real with Dan.
Yeah, screw that guy.
Yeah.
Get Real with Dan, periods in between. We will have a link to his Instagram profile in the show notes. Hopefully I'll fix that in post-production as well. So I won't sound so unprepared. By the way, we'll pull back the curtain just to see what kind of disaster, unfortunately, Dan has had to go through because of us on our end. Not only so we actually tried to record this the other day, and we had, for the first time in a long, I can't even remember if it's ever happened before, the power went out in our office when we were about 5 minutes into the episode. And then we were like, well, what happens if it goes out? We could start it again, but what happens if it goes out again? So we had to reschedule Dan for today. So that was sort of problem number one. Poor Dan had to, reschedule, and he was so nice and sweet about it. Then today, I'm recording another episode earlier, and I get this urgent message from my producer going, I think I put the wrong time on the schedule. Because I looked at it and I go, I thought it was at 3, and here we're doing it 2. And so I go, oh my God. And so that happened. And then I just got Dan's Instagram wrong. So we're going to make it up to Dan for sure. But we're really excited. I'm really, really excited to have him on the show because Dan, I believe, reached out to us, and, we love featuring younger, newer talent in the real estate pool. I think sometimes, we over focus here at the show on people who have made it to the very top of the mountain. And then oftentimes those people, it's harder for them to even remember that struggle of what it took to get up the mountain. And I think it's so interesting to hear people who are on that way up and are still dealing with some of those struggles, but have figured out a way to sort of persevere. And Dan is that guy, and we are so excited to have him. So Dan, welcome to the show. It's a very long intro, but I did screw up your Instagram, so I apologize.
Hey, it's okay. I feel bad for that other person. They're probably like, hey, I got some extra people follow me. Who are they? But
well, I did make Dan feel a little better, and I won't say, but we just turned down a very important guest that to have not to have Dan on the show, but I told Dan, I go, there's been all these problems with us recording this episode, but and I said, guess who we just turned down? So anyway, Dan is very special to us, and we're grateful to have him. But Dan, let's start at the very, very beginning of your sort of journey into real estate.
Yeah.
Tell us how you got into it, why, and how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, I have like a couple of variations of telling this, so I want to try to make it the most impactful for people who are listening and not, all too touchy-feely. But let's see. I worked for a company that we did kitchen services in colleges. And during that time, I was there from about 2010 to, about 2017, 2018. And I had the ability to provide or see, how do I want to put it? I just got to experience a lot of roles, right? I did from account management to HR to marketing. And it was a lot of seeing the problem and providing a solution, which, at the time you just kind of take for granted. You think that's like what people do when they're in those positions. And very fortunate to have that job. Got to the point where, it's kind of like the 7-year itch. I think I just kind of was getting a little burnt out, a little spent, wanted some new challenges, new things. And I think I kind of opened it up to the universe to provide that opportunity, and unfortunately came in the way of me being let go. Kind of butt heads with the operations director there at the time. But it's funny because everything really does work out, and I'll tell you more about that later. But so it's day one. Then you're like, hey, what do I want to do? Where am I going with this? And my passion has always really been like marketing and connecting communications. And so it was really day one. I went to a shared office space, and I was like, I need to just keep showing up to something, right? And started working on a few little projects here and there. But I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to have the dedication to this, like what I know it needs. And I've had some, friends in real estate. One of my best friends, who we've been buddies since we were little. I mean, we are best friends, through and through. He has always been he's been in real estate for about 8 years. And, well, at that point, I mean, it was 8 years. So now it's been 12, 13 years. And he was basically like, dude, real estate, man, like, come on, you've been saying you've been wanting to do real estate. And it has always been on the back burner. He used to take me to different trade events, and I was at guaranteed rates of rooftop parties and meeting people who are top producers now. And it was kind of like me now, doing the hustle, doing the thing, trying to figure it out. And at that time, it was kind of like, well, I'll do it eventually. And I think it was a little bit of having an ego back then, and just I was happy with what I was doing. So it's it happens for when it happens. And so, anyways, fast forward, I was like, okay, I think this is the time to do it. Why not? Things are kind of lining up. I think it would be a cool profession to get into. And I was kind of the way I got into it. And now it's been, a few years. So
how did you go about prospecting? I know you're from here, your family's from here. So some people would say, oh, you have this advantage where you must have this massive sphere of influence, and perhaps you do. But I always like to get into that, because I think even with a huge sphere of influence, it doesn't necessarily mean that the clients just come calling because you got your license. So can you talk a little bit about how you went out and found clients?
Yeah. So when I had the piece of paper saying, congratulations, you can real estate now, I met with a bunch of brokers, right? And managing brokers, from larger companies to smaller companies to very boutique companies. I just wanted to understand what made a brokerage successful, right? Yeah. And so I wasn't with that properties first. There was another one. And one of the questions one of them asked was just like, what's your, how big is your sphere of influence? I'm like, a sphere of what? And and I've heard that before, but in my mind, it was like the super close people in your life, right?
Sure.
Like just the ones that I can call up and be like, hey, it's Dan, what do you got? And
Right.
And I didn't really, I think at that point, because where I was at in my life, it was the communications I was having with these people. It wasn't from a quote unquote business perspective. So when I got started, it's like difficult, right? Because you think you have this identity with people, and I would do the things like, and I still do them, and I love doing them even more now, but I'd write letters to people. I would text people, and I, pick up the phone. I mean, that's like the strongest thing nowadays. I mean, that is like picking up the phone, calling other agents and that kind of stuff, whatever, but picking up the phone and just being like, hey, how are you? And it's like, I don't even know what to talk about. I was thinking about you. I just wanted to see how you've been doing. And, I think when you get into real estate, you hear from everybody. There's obviously these top producing, coaches out there, 5 calls a day, 10 text messages. And you're like, I don't even know, like, this is going to be 1 week's worth of people. But that's when you're like, okay, hey, I'm meeting new people. Like I just said, like, I went to that shared office. I've made clients through that. I've, done different things with charity, and you help out, and you start off, I feel like, especially for newer agents listening to this, and I see it with newer agents, they do the thing. And I think I did it too, was you do it for a few weeks and you're like, well, I got nothing from this. Yeah. And you're like, okay, let me step back. Like, why am I doing this? If I am only trying to touch base with people because I want business, like, why am I doing that? Right. And I think you start to evolve a little bit, and then when you do get a few, transactions behind you, and you start to get into the lives of people, and, you go out on showings with people, and you just learn, like, oh my God, like, life, what happens. And you're like, oh my God, like I need to help people. It's not even a want anymore. Like this is going on in people's lives and I want to be there for them. And it just gets easier then, because then when you do make these phone calls, you're not coming from the lens anymore. Like I want business. It's a genuine, you know, like innate thing in you, and you want to be able to help them. And, so.
Yeah, I think we're talking about intimacy. I think intimacy is really, realtors have a unique ability to develop these deeper sort of connections with their prospects, their clients. You get to help them make pretty important financial decisions, right? Like buying, selling, investing, possibly renting. There's a lot of people's emotion and identity are tied into where they live, and it becomes, as we know, everyone listening knows just how powerful that experience is, especially when someone gets to buy their first home. I mean, that is truly a remarkable moment. I remember the day I bought my first place, and I'm sure everyone listening who owns a place probably remembers that as well. And real estate agents are uniquely positioned to sort of be a part of that. Obviously, you're part of the transaction, but be part of the emotional component of it and the intimacy of it. And then, intimacy is really what gets people to want to, you to tell their friends about you, and be like, wow, my agent really cares about me. My agent knows about me. My agent calls me and just checks in and sees how I'm doing, or reminds me that it's the anniversary date of my purchasing this home 3 years ago, or things like that. And I think that is so cool, because all of that stuff, it's not that you're also not providing value and information about the housing market and maybe some strategies that they may want to consider. I mean, there's a skill set that is absolutely needed, but and just understanding what's going on in the market and the news, and being able to relay that to your prospects and clients. But there's also this, like even my financial advisor doesn't really have an intimate relationship with me. I mean, they know what my finances look like, but they don't really know that much. I mean, they know my life, but it's not the same. They're not walking through me in their house. They've never seen where I live. My accountant has never seen where I live. They're super important people, but real estate has this sort of built-in intimacy and empathy, I think, that is really cool. And it absolutely binds people together. And that's why the vast majority of buyers decide that, assuming they had a good experience, they use the same agent over and over and over again. So I didn't mean to go on a rant there, but I just thought you really touched on that. And I think that's really, really important.
Yeah. And just, on top of that, we all have things that have occurred in our lives from the moment. I mean, even before we're born, the things that happen to everybody else impacts that person. We're all just sand pushing against each other at the end of the day. Right. And, we go out, and I've had some people who they're like, oh, I either have seen a few places. It's like, okay, we've got to reset like this. And that's why I use that term philosophical, because there's a deeper thing going on, and it's, you want to have emotions, you want to have happy emotions, good emotions, but especially, if anything like the last year has proven, it was hard on people, because, I had so many people I talked to, and they're like, oh, you must, like, real estate must be going great right now. And it's like, yes and no, it is, but it's difficult because, when you've gone out, 20, 30, 40 places. And, I was very, like, I look back at a lot of my numbers, and I was trying to figure out why I had such a great conversion rate. But it's not even just working with your clients and getting to understand where they're at, what they need, all those things. But once you've positioned them to that, it's really connecting with that other agent then, right? That's when, you're making those phone calls. I worked with, just kind of a quick story. I was working with this couple, and, we saw probably like 30 places almost, just kind of mixed around the city. Yeah. Nothing that was ever really hitting, but we're like honing in, and,
you're getting,
they're kind of right. And they were kind of like, does what we want exist? I'm like, it does. I'm like, it's a timing thing. I'm like, the first few, you kind of get that contrast. The next few, you kind of really see what you need, what you don't need, what you learn about yourself. Then you start to hone in, right? And that's where we were at. Took a little bit longer, and that's fine. It takes as long as it takes. But of course, the one they went to was just a random open house. And they're like, hey, Dan, we went to this open house. And, I was asking them all these questions about it. How many people were there? Tell me, blah, blah, blah. So I call up the agent, and I'm just like, hey, so guess what? I usually, get out there with my clients. They popped in, and I need to kind of know where we're at because they're interested. He's like, well, we had about 45 showings today. And I was like, I'm
Wow.
not, yeah, I'm like, not surprised. Are you starting to get offers? We are. Okay. I'm like, well, here's what I need to do. I'm like, I need to get in there. I need to get in there with my clients. We need to see this place all together. And I'm like, however that means, I'm the type of agent where it's like, you can't make it as a client. I'm going on your behalf. We're going to, FaceTime. We're going to make this thing happen. Right. Because I need to know really what the weight is so we can position ourselves, and we learned about what the sellers wanted, all those conversations with the other agent. And, we won the offer and, it's
Wow.
knowing those kind of things. And that's where that, as you just said, that intimacy, it's crazy because it's the deep level of those people. It's knowing where they're positioned. It's knowing everything. And they're just, I could sit here and ramble for, days about how deep this goes. But if you're on the outside, if you're not in real estate, or if you don't have that view, I think it just kind of like on the level, it's like, oh, it's somebody who wants to buy a home. It's like, that's, it's everything but just that. So
How important is it for you as let's say the buyer's agent in this example, having a good relationship with the selling agent, the agent representing the seller, I should say, because it's, like, are you able to, because we know that on paper, our commissions are called cooperative commissions, which means the two agents are supposed to cooperate to close a transaction. But
yeah.
But again, these sellers right now are selling agents, listing agents are, of course, I always get confused because in Illinois, we call a selling agent the person who represents the buyer. So I always think, why do we do that? Why don't we, maybe I'm just dumb. So we'll say buyer and seller. So anyway,
right
working with buyers and,
yeah,
and working with the listing agent, the seller,
yeah.
how important is it for you to have a good relationship with other agents so that not that they'll do you any particular favors, although that certainly could happen, but just understanding what it's going to take to get this deal closed, understanding what the seller is looking for. You obviously know what the buyers look. How important is it to have that kind of relationship?
Oh, it's the pinnacle. It's the highest thing. It's the most important thing, really. I think, especially in this business, if you want to go on with it, you get an identity, or you get, this thing attached to you. And, I like to be as transparent as possible, right? Of course, this is a game of poker in a sense. I could be holding pocket aces. The agents around me don't need to know that, but how I play them, there's a way to do it right. You can't just go all in and everybody folds and you're done. But with the other agent, it's being on the same page. We're all from different walks of life as well. We all come from different industries. I know agents who just got started during COVID, and they, like we were talking about, closings, and they're like, you go to closings? I'm like, yeah, I always go to closings. They're like, I don't go. It's like, oh, right, because you started at a time where you couldn't go, right? So going back to the whole relationship with the agent, knowing who they are and how they view and interpret real estate is very critical to me. And even so much that if I feel some discomfort from them, like on just this was actually me being on the listing side just recently, but I had the agent, they won the offer, and he was just like, okay, we'll take it off the MLS. I'm like, just slow down. Like, just, like we just accepted, like, just, where's this coming from? Where, so.
Yeah. Why is this important? Yeah.
Right. So quickly, like, he thinks that I was going to entertain all their offers, and, I get that things happen. And again, they got the earnest money submit. I'm just like, get me the signed just all the things that you have to have, crossing the T's, dotting the I's. And as soon as he did that, he messaged me. He's like, okay, go ahead. Like, hurry up, like, take it. I'm like, hey, you free for a call now? And I called him up. I'm like, I said, hey, how's it going? I'm like, do you have a little bit of time to talk right now? I'm like, we need to make sure we're on the same page. I'm like, what has happened in the past? Has there
what's going on? Right.
Right. And he pushed back a little bit. And then all of a sudden he opened up and he's like, no, like, there have been times, and I'm like, well, and I don't want to slip and say his name, but I'm just like, look, I'm like, we have both interests of both of our clients at stake here. And I need to make sure we're on the same page, because if something comes up through now, there's a lot of things that go on between contract to close. And I'm like, if we can't be on the same page, what are we doing for our clients? And I'm like, I need to know where you're at. I'm like, I'm not here to change you in any way, but you need to understand some agents that you worked with. Like, I don't know what happened, but, and I can tell you that I will do things a little bit differently. Until it happens, you don't know, right? Because again, it's interpretation of the individual. But I go into it with that because I have, the saying that, I tell my clients, I tell everybody, I like to sleep at night, and I know you do too. If I'm going to go to sleep, thinking like, hey, this guy is kind of being a little scatterbrained, all over the place, a little worried, what's going to happen? And then if something happens and the deal does fall apart at some point, and if I did feel that discomfort, how am I supposed to go back to my client and be like, well, I guess the deal died? It's like, no, like we had these conversations. We were on the same page. If something else happened along the way, that's understandable, that maybe it's beyond our control and we have to just position ourselves to deal with that. But I know, I'm working hard to make sure I have that reputation with the other agent. And even if they're like, whatever, and hang up on me or something, that never happens. But, if there was somebody who was like that, great. Now I know that's how they view business too. So I get more information that way too. And that goes for both sides of the deal then. So.
I think that's really interesting. I wonder how often agents really even view the co-broker, as an ally in a lot of ways. Yes, you are representing your client's best interest, and you're looking to either get the highest or the lowest price depending on what side you're on. And it is a little bit of a battle in that sense, but it's a cooperative battle, and both parties really want to get to the end goal. And developing good relationships with agents it seems so like, well, doesn't everyone do that? But a lot of people don't. And so, Dan, I think you did something very emotionally intelligent, which was when the person started having that request about, hey, get this off the MLS. And by the way, for stories like this, if anyone is, probably almost all of our listeners are members of Lab Coat Agents on Facebook, it is a perfect place to learn about how agents treat each other, because every day there's probably 30 examples of, you're not going to believe what these other agents said to me, and it's shocking. And it's like, wow. Playing nice in the sandbox is really a great skill. And I have a quick question for you. This is just a simple question. So you were talking about being on the listing side. Mm-hmm. How often and we're in this situation with, even now, I know the mortgage rates just climbed again today, but they're still crazy low. How often, because we have so many people now who can afford things because of low interest rate environments that weren't able to buy as much property as before. So you get, as you said, a lot of offers, a lot of requests for showings. How often does an agent call you and say, hey, I already read, I've read everything on the MLS. I feel like I have a decent sense of this property, but can you give me a couple of key things to mention when I go to the showing as the buyer's agent? Like, do you get those kind of calls? Where you're like, hey, Dan, help me sell this home for you. Does that happen a lot or not that often?
So, it's funny. I think a lot of people, when they get in real estate, they do a lot more buy side first, right?
Sure.
And then you start to pick up listings. And I think that's just, typical. But as listing, I get calls, but I think it's because I was doing that. I'd call up agents, and be like, hey, we're going to be going to the showing. I either have seen this through the, photography or whatever, this is something, whatever. Can you give me a little bit more insights? Right. I'm not asking for a lot, maybe if it's something important to my client. And then it's like, okay, they always be like, yeah, here's something. And I like, if you give silence to people, they'll usually keep giving you more. And then all of a sudden it turns into like, well, also, I just want to let you know the seller, or the seller has actually already moved, and they want to sell quick. It's like, okay, well, now I'm getting more information that other agents don't have. But yeah, I think with my listings, I've been surprised because I get like offers sent to me and nobody even calls me, and I'm like, I don't know anything about you. Like, could you have at least picked up the phone and be like, hey, Dan, just want to let you know I submitted an offer. Like, if you have questions, let me know. Give me a call. And they're just like throwing contracts at me in the email. And I'm just like, and they're like poorly written. And, it's like slot. But anyway, I'm not by no means. There's a lot of phenomenal agents out there. I get, where they pack it up nicely. Everything's there. But I feel like some agents I'm not, getting like that due diligence, and it doesn't take a lot. And it's not like you have to do it all the time, but just a quick, hey, can you tell me a little bit more? Is there something about it? My clients, I think they're going to really like this place. If we were to come in with an offer, possibly, is there anything I can get them, ready to roll on? So, but
Yeah, and conversations can be had, especially right now, where you can get really creative and you can talk to the other agent, assuming they're available to talk, and say things like,
Yeah.
"Hey, what about a buy side contingency? Oh, what's that? Well, let's talk about that." Or what about a warranty or whatever? There's a million different little things you can put in, but that all happens with conversation, and it is tough when you're getting dozens and
Of
dozens of
course.
offers,
Right.
but it is also the job, right? So it's like one
Yeah.
of those things where um, I want to talk about discipline, because you're an Ironman athlete. And to me, there is no greater display of discipline, physical discipline, than the
Yeah.
ability to perform in an Ironman competition.
Yeah.
I, I have a trainer, a personal trainer, and I work out 3 times a week for an hour, 3 times. And that is the only way I will get to the gym. It's
Yeah.
it's embarrassing because I spend a fortune, but it works for me, because I do not have that discipline. So I am curious on what how what how the role of discipline has played into, obviously, athletics for you, but
Yeah.
also how that's translated over into your real estate business.
Yeah, and it's funny. So the Ironman thing, I did a full Ironman in Cozumel last year in November. It was my first one, actually. So by calling I still even saying like I'm like an Ironman, I am, because I did the one. But meeting other people there, and it's very similar to real estate then, because it's a lifestyle, right? It's not just,
Yeah.
you don't, and my goal was to finish. I think, as most people who do an Ironman for the first time, I've never even swam over 2 miles in my life, and I had to do 2.4 miles in the ocean. And like, it's those things that live in you then, right? And so it does create a new level of discipline. It creates a new, ability to process things differently. And those are the kind of things that, when I signed up for it, I signed up for it about 8 months before it. And with real estate, there would be things like, making tough phone calls, or, having long days, or going out to, scheduling, and you're going to do like 14 showings. And it's like, that's, pulling data on 14 places, doing an analysis on 14 places, driving to 14 places, parking at 14 places, working with client, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not telling anything agents don't know, but oh my God, like, it's not just physically draining, it's incredibly mentally draining, and those were different clients too. It wasn't, I mean, there's no way I'm going to show one person 14 places. We'd be like, which one was that again? But so it's like they go hand in hand, but it is the ability to recognize that, hey, I have the right, you have the right, we all have the right to move at a pace, whether we, hit the throttle a little bit harder, or we can come back a little bit. I think to know when you need, whether it's a day in real estate where you take, a good, half day for yourself, and, you just kind of relax and you read, and, you move your blocks around, and maybe, a few blocks that aren't client related, move to another day, whatever it is, we have that right. And it's that mindset, it's always, as this, the term for this is, it's like the show saying, hey, we broadcast the 1%. Well, to me, 1% isn't the agents, it's a mindset. And it's that push to stay focused, to, if there's going to be something that stresses you out, to just get it fixed right then, whatever that might look like. But kicking that can down the road is not going to do anything. And then if you allow those things to keep happening, your mindset's just going to fall backwards, and that discipline is going to fall apart. And similar to mindset, or similar to Ironman, you're just going to start to fall apart. So
How important is it to know your why? And again, let's relate it to the Ironman. So the
yeah,
Ironman is a goal of sorts.
yeah,
I personally, I'm not a huge fan of goals versus direction. For me, what works better for me personally is pushing myself in the right direction consistently. Now, if I want to run an Ironman, I have to do whatever is necessary. Sorry, I shouldn't say run. Compete in an Ironman. I have
yeah,
to run, bike, and swim. I have to do all of those things in a very disciplined way to be able to get to a place where I can then go to Cozumel and participate in a brutally difficult physical endurance situation.
yeah.
So that, but how important is it to know why Is that important for your mindset? I'm just
Oh my
curious.
God.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
Yeah, the why is in, oh my gosh, like the why is that's your little power plant. Like that's your source of energy. And I've been trying over the last probably, couple of years, especially getting into this, to figure that out. And it's always, I think some people, depending on where they're at in their life, it can be anything, right? Our whys are all going to be different.
Yeah.
And I think for me, so like my why to go to connect it was, over a decade ago. So when my grandfather passed away, the house that, him and my grandmother lived in, my grandmother passed away a few years before him. I always like dreamt of owning it. Like I wanted it. When I was a little kid and I go over there, I used to think like, I'm going to own this one day, but you don't know the reality of the future. You just see the future as you are right now. And you're like,
Sure.
everything's gonna be great. Like I'm going to own my grandfather's house and he's still going to be here. It's like, well, that doesn't make sense. But so when he passed away, I ended up buying it from my father and my aunt, who was left to then. And I did not work with an agent at the time. The transaction to me was, at the time, I'm just like, I'm going to make this work. I'll figure it out. But I was not like, if I would have been out on the search by myself, I would not have bought a home. I would not have bought that home. There's nothing in the whole lineup that made sense on paper, but I was like, I'm going to make it happen because I wanted it. It was purely,
it was important to you.
Exactly. It was, but the thing was, it was 100% emotional purchase. And if you make any decisions with the background or with the push of emotion, it's not going to turn out well usually, even if it's like a super high level emotion, because that energy just fades away. It turns off.
Yeah, sure.
Because emotion is just like, it's a drug. So throughout that time, just a whole bunch of stuff, I would see things like his taxes, because, he had senior freeze on it. And this was like an Edgewater. So, all of a sudden I'm like getting hit with like these, yearly taxes of like $8,000, $9,000. I could have just taken a box of whatever money I had and just lit it on fire and it would have been the same thing. It was,
yeah.
But so, I fast forward, a couple of years, I would just spent on it, everything, man, maintaining a home by myself, it was an emotional drain on me. And, there's other things that go into it, and not to go into it, but then I felt like a failure on that. And, it's just like, obviously then I felt bad. Like I felt like I let my grandfather down, and then I had to sell, and then that's a whole nother level of emotion. So I saw both ends of the spectrum of emotions in the home tied to me. So then when I had to sell it, I had to go through all that. And then of course, when I bought it, I didn't have any agency support. So selling it, I'm like learning how a listing agent works for the first time. And then just also to remind you, I bought it like in 2008, and I sold it like I sold time. I bought it. I bought it at 2008, and then I sold it in 2011. Just the worst times in real estate to buy at a time and then to sell at a time. That's when somebody who was buying then they did gangbusters in the future. But again, money aside, but I've looked back at that a lot, and to go to the power of the why. It's changed a lot for me now over these last few years, because I've seen it show up in other clients. I've had clients who are like, oh my God, Dan, I need to have this house. And I'm like, okay, there's things here. Like, no, like, and I come to become the voice of reason for them. Right.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, like, oh my God, like when I work with clients, like I tell them like, you see things right here, you're present. I see the future. I don't, I'm not selling for right now. That goes for everything. That goes for, your referrals, for selling with you in the future, buying with you in the future. If a parent passes away, I want you to give me that call. I don't care about right now, but I also, when they're like, we want to have kids, and I'm like, why are we looking at a 2-bedroom home and stuff? Like, you want to have a family, all that kind of stuff. But the why gets activated at different times, and it charges you. And it's really powerful, because I think it's for a lot of us, especially as agents. We were all probably, our past lives are they're crazy. A lot of us, we were either spent and burnt out in, a corporate world, or we had a transaction similar to mine where just like, I never want anybody else to feel that pain ever again. And those are the things. And, when that's the why, and it could be for whatever, it's when you really find it, it's like magical, it's so hard to explain, but and that's the thing, like it's still happening. Right. So.
Yeah, I think you just said a lot, and it's really, really good stuff, because I think the ability to really be able to bring ideas to your clients based on what you know about them that are outside of the, hey, Dan, can you help me go see this property? Which of course you will and can do. But
Mm-hmm.
this idea of being like, hey, by the way, you told me you wanted children. We're looking at 2 bedrooms. Why are we doing that? That's an amazing question to ask somebody. Many agents, I think, are afraid to push back, or confront. And this isn't a negative. It's just challenge their customer and just say, hey, let's think about this. What do we really want here? What do we want in 3 years? What do we want in 5 years? How long are you going to be here? And you then can also say, let me tell you a story about a decision I made, that ended up being emotional, and it was important, and I'm glad I made it. It ended up not really working out, but I want to sort of, like, you even just sharing what you did with our listeners, is a story that we all can relate to. Now, we all haven't bought our grandparents' home, but we have all made decisions like that we went, gosh, I really did it for the right reason, but I didn't really have all the information, and I wish somebody would have guided me through that process. That, I think, is the cornerstone of a good agent. The ones that can say, I see the future here, and it might not line up with what you actually want, versus you love the home, you want to put an offer in, great, let's do it. And yes, you have to do that too. But I think you going one step beyond that and said, well, yes, and this is let's just hold tight for a moment. Let's really think about this. How long do we want to be here? And is this actually the best fit? Because emotionally, it's way more fun just to make decisions with emotions, right? You get excited, you go, this is perfect, let's do it. We're seeing it now in the building I live in. It's a new development, and we're in the process of converting the ownership or the board from the developer over to the homeowners. And it's so funny because we're on this long WhatsApp chat of all the owners, and and the owners are lovely, wonderful people. This is not a knock at any of them, but they're always talking about what's wrong and what's missing and what wasn't done correctly, which is what owners do. And I mean, look, I do the same thing. And if you were to just read the text, this text thread that is never ending, you would think, oh my gosh, like the developer really must have dropped the ball. And it's like, wow, everyone's so unhappy. And then you realize, like, emotionally we react to things, and then we want to talk about those things. And oftentimes it's like, no, 99% of what the developer did is perfect. It's really, really great. We're hyper focusing on these issues, and now it feels like this is everything. Like, these little issues are oh my God, are we going to have to sue the developer? Like, who knows? There's a lot of those emotions that go into it. And I think realtors have this unique ability, if they have the experience and they've been around long enough, to just go, hang tight. Here's how these things usually go. And especially first-time home buyers, they're the most freaked out. And of course they are. I mean, I was. And so I think, Dan, what you're saying is really important, which is, you're guiding someone through the process, but you're also making sure that that you understand you can be their sort of support system as they go through this process. And the discipline of your business, I think, gives you the freedom, because you're so disciplined. Dan is incredible. I mean, anyone who runs, I keep saying run, anyone who participates in Ironman triathlons have to be obviously incredibly disciplined. There's just no other way to do it. So Dan has a discipline to his business, and that enables him to then continually learn. He's always pushing the ball forward. It enables him to be there for his clients when he's not reactive. You're a proactive realtor versus reactive. Can you talk a little bit about that? Like, what do you think, as you've been in this business a few years, what are some of the behaviors that you've seen other agents do that were really impressive to you, or things you've adopted into your own practice? Just out of curiosity.
Yeah. Oh man, there's a lot. But one of the things is all these like concepts and ideas and practices and beliefs and things like that. It's something that, since I got into it, when I got into real estate, it was, okay, what do I like about, this agent, what they're doing? It could be the way that they communicate something. It could be a showing schedule. It could be like, hey, we're only going to do weekends, whatever. And sometimes I'd view it like, okay, how is that beneficial to me? And how is that beneficial to them? Whatever. One of the things that, and it was actually brought up on one of your recent shows, and I think actually a couple you've said it, but you're like, there's 46,000 agents in, Chicagoland area. That means I am going up against, 45,999 people. Now, of course, like direct competition, no, but how we set that bar, it's in because even if I had an area that I'm in, or, my niche of, doing multi-units or something like that, if I don't stay at, my strive to become the top, if I'm not there, then, how am I helping the clients? How am I benefiting the industry? How am I helping community? So, to answer that question, like, what kind of things are out there, it's doing this, right? It's telling my story, because I want other agents who are either thinking about getting in real estate or currently in it to understand, like, you don't just show up and get business, like, but you also don't have to aggressively go seek it either. You've got to be you. One of my, recent, every year I come up with a mantra. I don't do like resolutions, but I come up with something that's going to be a nice reminder. Last year was be better. Any day you're having a bad day or just a, situation, you're a little weird, you tell yourself, be better. Like, what does that mean? In the moment, you figure it out. This year it's show up, be you. You've got to show up. And that's like me coming to this office every day. I come every day, even if like the day is like not a ton of business going on that day. Maybe I don't have a lot of showings. Maybe I'm not doing a lot of, the active work for things, but I still am, sending out my postcards. I'm still making phone calls. I'm still going up, getting coffees or drinks or lunches with people. You got to just keep going. Right. And I think that's like the biggest thing I've learned from agents who are successful. And it's, everybody has the ability to be successful, right? You can't just sit around at home, because you could have a good day. Then all of a sudden a day that you're just not really feeling it. What are you going to do? You're going to turn on the TV. You're going to do things you shouldn't, no business comes to you just sitting on the couch. So it's like these constant reminders. And I know it's kind of like I'll run around to the answer, but those are the things that I've seen in other agents. Cause I watch, who's the ones come to the office, top performers, who's the,
shocking.
Right. Like, you get all these crazy real estate shows out there, but the girls of Selling Sunset aren't going to their home every day. They're going back to the office and talking, and you learn so much. Like my managing broker's on the other side. I hear him telling stuff. And of course, none of those details are, if he's talking about a deal with another agent, like I'll never know who it is, but I'm hearing stuff. I'm like, wow, that's a great idea. Or like, ooh, like I'll have to remember that. Or like, oh my God, like that's an interesting situation, and you can even go to them and be like, hey, I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but what's going on? They're like, well, like we're dealing with this client who's doing this. And you're like, oh, wow. Like, didn't know that, you know what I mean? And it doesn't matter how long you've been in this business, you're going to come across something that just like, that's different. And, that's where like something again on the pursuit of like, making it, like, do you ever really make it? Because even if you touch number one, you got to hold on to that. And what does that mean? You still got to be pushing hard. So, that's, again, kind of the run around of the answer, but
before I started this podcast, no, it's a great answer. Before I started this podcast, I was actually doing a version of this for the agents in our office where, it's funny. I was at home. I was raised in Peoria, Illinois, which is like central Illinois. And, I've lived in Chicago pretty much my whole adult life. And so I was in Peoria and I was going through the paper. This is a million years ago. And I saw a name that I recognized for a realtor advertising, some property, or maybe all the properties. This is back when, realtors did newspaper ads. And I recognized the last name, and it turned out to be the brother of a girl, a woman I knew when she was in high school. And so I said, oh, hey, your brother seems really successful. I just got into real estate. We have a bunch of agents. Would it be okay if I interview him to ask him about how he became successful? And she goes, oh, he'd love it. And so I talked to him. He's the 7th highest producing realtor in Peoria at that time. And he'd been in business a while. And I said, what's the secret to your success? And he goes, I show up at the office every day at, I don't know, like a reasonable hour. Like it was 8 o'clock, I think, or it wasn't later than that, but it was around 8 a.m. He goes, there's 100 some agents in his office. He goes, I'm the first one here. Or maybe he shows up at 7:30. I mean, it wasn't a crazy early,
right. It wasn't like a 4 a.m. person kind of thing. Right.
No, he wasn't that guy. And oh, by the way, he sells 115 homes a year. So it's a home every like couple of days, basically. And he goes, I show up at, 7:30 or 8. I do my calls. He had his whole routine, and he goes, I start to see agents funnel in around 9:30, 10, then they're out to lunch. Then he goes, if you just show up and time block and actually have, sort of, your day scheduled, and your why, because his whole thing was, he goes, I just want to be available for my kids in the afternoons and evenings, because he had young kids at the time. And he said, I want to be there for their events. And, real estate, oftentimes you're not there during those things. So he goes, I'm going to try to do as much as I can during the day, so that most nights and weekends that I'm available. And he goes, and I sell 100 and some homes a year. And it was just him. And I went, oh, and he goes, it's amazing, DJ. He goes, the only people that show up at the office are the people that are in his office are the ones that are actually doing a lot of business. And he goes, probably not a coincidence. And so certainly not suggesting that everybody listening needs to get an office space. But Dan said something also when he started, and he was doing shared office space. And, oh, by the way, other people are going to be there too. And that's a great opportunity to interact and meet people and just go somewhere and do, like, if you want to train for an Ironman, you have to make plans, right? You have to know where you're swimming, where you're biking, where you're running, probably for a full year. You got to have that figured out, because at some point that's all going to be put to the test. So you can't just kind of go, well, I need to find a pool, and I need, like, it all has to be really, really meticulously thought out. And I think realtors oftentimes forget that building your business, it doesn't have to be as intense as an Ironman, but it really is an Ironman. I mean, it truly is. I mean, you're putting that kind of time and dedication in. And I mean, look, finishing an Ironman is a perfectly amazing goal. Like, that's an incredible goal. And one that 99.99% of people will never be able to achieve. Dan did it through small, consistent action, that, over a prolonged period of time, 8 months, which is, by the way, impressive. But that's real estate's kind of the same thing. And if you can just focus on those tasks, and as Dan was saying, the driver is the why. The driver is, hey, I want to do this for these reasons, for my family, for myself, for financial reasons, for freedom, for whatever those reasons are. You can lock into that every morning, and then the day's kind of exciting. And then realizing that, oh yeah, now I got to go, swim 4 miles or well, in your, or whatever it is. It's like, well, that's the part that sort of sucks, but that's what's going to get me to the goal. So the part that sort of sucks is actually, nobody really wants to lift weights. Nobody really wants to pick up the phone and call 50 people, but it's a good idea. And I want to just end, Dan, with picking up the phone, and just because I just mentioned it, I know I feel like nobody picks up the phone anymore. So can we talk a little bit about the importance of the phone, just as a really practical tool for our listeners?
Yeah. Oh my God. It's one of my differentiators. When people ask, what's something that's different from other agents, I'm like, I pick up the phone. I use the phone. It's something that when you talk to other agents, it's funny because you get some other agents who are like, oh, when I call people, they don't answer. It's like, have you ever thought they could be at showings and meetings, just busy eating lunch? They'll call you back. Hey, this is leave a quick voicemail. Hey, this is Dan. I'm going to, what I usually do too for some people, if, that they're going to be a little apprehensive using phone, it's like, hey, this is Dan. I just wanted to discuss whatever. Give me a call when you get a chance. Otherwise, I'll give you another call maybe later at 3:00,
Yeah.
So now it's like, if they hate the phone, like, crap, this guy's going to call again. I must as well just call him now. But, and then you get them on the phone, whatever if it's a situation, if it's a deal, if it's just making a phone call to somebody, it's usually you start talking a little bit, you get these people who will be like, I only have a couple minutes. I'm like, you probably have more. If you answer, that means you have the time. And I respect that. But then they start going on and rambling, and, they're telling their whole life story, and you get off the phone and you're just like, well, now I know too much information. And that goes for anything. It doesn't matter what it is. It's like me right now. When you ask me questions, I just keep going until basically stop me. But that's what we do. Yeah. Right. And it's, and that's something I value, especially I think as realtors, we got to remember to listen. And when you call somebody and you pick up the phone, they're giving you something. They're giving you, first of all, they're giving you time. They're giving you information. They're giving you something. And you have to appreciate that. You don't get that from, you could send text messages. That's great. There's nothing wrong with that either. But then you're getting in this dialogue, you're getting this back and forth, and you're losing the emotion, you're losing the value. People will set their phones back down and, they read it, then they forget to respond because now it's not fresh anymore. It's stuff like that. So, there's another person that an agent, she was, she was a little bit younger, and that's fine. But she was asking like 10 million questions through email, and just like, just pick up the phone, and then she's like, we're going to write an offer. And I'm like, awesome. And then during it, she's asking more questions. I'm just like, oh my God. I'm like, you're one of those people that you're going to say you're super busy, but you're super busy because you're making things so much more difficult for yourself, So the phone is definitely powerful. And, I also have some clients where it's like, you call them and they'll never answer. So a couple text messages here and there, whatever. And that's fine too. But, I also don't want to put people in the position of discomfort for things that they don't enjoy, but, it's powerful. So if you're thinking, if you're listening to this and you're like, well, I don't like picking it up, it's like, just pick it up, start getting comfortable with it. Call your best friend and start getting comfortable talking to people on the phone again. Yeah. So
yeah, it's becoming a bit of a lost art. I mean, I'm shocked at how few phone calls I get throughout the year, other than from my closest friends. I almost never get them from service providers, accountant, financial advisor, insurance person, realtor. I really don't. People really don't get many calls anymore, and I think it's a really easy way to build intimacy. I think it's harder to build intimacy on text. It certainly can be done, and there are people that prefer it that way. But I think going the extra mile, picking up the phone demonstrates a level of care that is really, really important. And obviously, part of the secret of Dan's success is, look, Dan's an Ironman, participant. This is a guy who knows that if you do all these daily actions, you can achieve some really big things. And he's doing that. I really encourage everyone listening to follow Dan on Instagram. And that is Get Real with Dan. And there's periods between that. So it's Get period, Real period, with period, Dan. We'll put that link in our show notes, the podcast episode notes. But Get Real with Dan on Instagram. You can learn more about what Dan's doing. Dan also goes to the office every day. I think that is just an amazing thing. Dan, this has been a great episode. I really definitely want to have you back on, and we can talk more about Dan's just crushing it. Is just a few years in. He's really doing well. He's got great attitude. We absolutely, everyone listening knows he is on the way up. So Dan, we thank you so much for your willingness to share, be vulnerable, also tell us some great suggestions about how agents can stay focused and stay busy, and really build better relationships with their clients. So on behalf of the audience, we want to thank you for taking time, 2 different times now, because if you're just probably not tuning in now, but Dan and I had actually attempted to record this a few days ago and we had a power surge. So Dan is a super easygoing, great guy. And he's going to be a lot of fun to watch as he continues to, go up that mountain of success in real estate. So on behalf of the audience, we thank you for being so diligent with us.
It's been a pleasure.
And sharing with our audience. And then also on behalf of Dan and myself, we want to thank the audience for listening, participating, and also please tell a friend. That's the best way you can help our show continue to persevere, is by letting other agents know about this episode. So I guarantee an agent that could benefit from hearing from somebody like Dan. So please send them a link to this episode, and then also leave us a review. Whatever podcast system or delivery system you might be listening to us on, Apple Podcast, iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, Pandora, etc. Let us know what you think of the show. That really helps us improve and also tells us what you think, and gets us more visibility. So we appreciate the help there. Dan, really great chatting with you. Thank you so much. And we will see everybody on the next episode.
Yeah. Thank you. It's been a pleasure.